Hello listeners, welcome back to 91.2 FM Hello Haldwani, your very own community radio station. I am Dr. Megha Pant, Assistant Professor in the Department of English and Foreign Languages, and today we have a special session on literary terms, essential concepts that every literature enthusiast should know.
Yes, Megha. And I am Nikita, PhD scholar in the Department of English and Foreign Languages. As you know, we have been discussing some fascinating literary terms. We started with alphabet A, and in this lecture, we will be continuing with S and ending with Z. We will also discuss some examples from literature to bring these terms to life.
Absolutely. Before we start, Nitika, I remember when we first started this series, it feels like a journey, and I am so happy that we have reached to the end of the series, and it is nice that we finished it together.
Yes, Megha, I feel the same way. It's been such a rewarding experience, and I am thrilled that we are closing this chapter side by side. But this is not the end of our collaboration. We will soon be back with another series.
Indeed, let's make this finale memorable. Shall we begin with the letter S?
Yes, Megha. So what have you included under the term S?
The first term is satire. It's a literary device used to expose and criticize foolishness on or corruption in society, often through humor or irony. There are two major types of satire, formal and direct, and further they are subdivided into three parts: Horatian, Juvenalian, and Menippean satire. Horatian satire is light-hearted, witty, and humorous. Nitika, please tell our listeners any one of the examples based on Horatian satire.
I'm sure you must have read Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. It is considered a very famous example of it. The poem critiques the societal norms and value of the upper class, employing satire to make fun at their excesses.
Thank you, Nitika. You explained it in a very simple way. The second Juvenalian satire is harsh, bitter, and serious. A classic example of Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, where he satirizes the British treatment of the Irish by suggesting something absurd, eating children. And the third is Menippean satire. It is a fine mixture of comic and serious. For example, we can see Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It employs a mix of irony, sarcasm, and ridicule to critique the excesses of modern society.
Such an interesting term. And what is the next term?
The second term is soliloquy. It's a speech delivered by a character alone on stage, revealing their inner thoughts. Think of Hamlet's famous "to be or not to be" soliloquy in Shakespeare's Hamlet.
To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. One can never forget these lines.
Yes, Nitika, very nice. Now third we have sonnet, a 14-line poem or lyric written in iambic pentameter which follows a certain rhyme scheme. The sonnet is derived from the Italian word sonetto, which means a little song. Italian poet Petrarch is known as the father of sonnet. Petrarch developed an 8-line stanza known as octave, followed by a 6-line stanza known as sestet, with a rhyme scheme ABBA, ABBA for octave and CDE, CDE for sestet. Nitika, in 16th century, Sir Thomas Beat was the only one who introduced sonnet form into English poetry, along with Henry Howard, who is also known to have introduced blank verse into English literature. His sonnets are known as English sonnets. He divided sonnets into 3 quatrains, followed by a heroic couplet with a certain rhyming scheme ABAB, CD, EF, GG. Their sonnets were published under the title Totals Miscellany in 1557. Nitika, will you please add something more on sonnets for the better understanding of our listeners?
Yes. So Megha, as you know, William Shakespeare and John Milton were the greatest propounders of sonnets in England. So sonnet in English literature known as English sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet, and then we have Miltonic sonnet. Shakespeare followed the style developed by Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, and Milton followed the pattern of octave and sestet. So Megha, can you tell us about Spenserian sonnets as well?
Yes, Spenserian sonnets are the third type of sonnets, as Spenser was one of the best poets of the Elizabethan age. and he invented his own form and rhyme scheme, which was ABAB, BCBC, CDCDEE.
Let us continue to the next literary term.
Next literary term is stream of consciousness, a narrative style that captures the flow of a character's thoughts. William James was the father of stream of consciousness. Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse is an excellent example of stream of consciousness. Moving on to T.
So our first term of letter T is tragedy, a drama that deals with serious themes and often ends in disaster. According to Plato, tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude in language embellished with various kinds of artistic expressions, which through pity and fear affects the purgation of such emotions. Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, Shakespeare's Macbeth, Hamlet, King Lear, and Romeo and Juliet are some of the greatest examples of tragedy.
You have given very nice examples, and after hearing the names of tragedies, I am recalling another term, that is tragic flaw. So, will you please explain tragic flaw?
Yes, Megha. In tragedy, the tragic flaw is also known as hamartia. It refers to the error, weakness, or moral failing of the protagonist that ultimately leads to their downfall. This flaw is often a result of hubris, which means excessive pride, ignorance, or a mistaken judgment. Examples of tragic flaws can be Oedipus's hubris and ignorance in Oedipus Rex, Macbeth's ambition and greed in Macbeth, and Hamlet's indecisiveness in the play Hamlet. And then we can also consider Achilles' pride and rage in Homer's Iliad.
Interesting. And what is the third literary term?
Our next and third term is textual criticism. It is the process of analyzing and comparing different versions of a written text to determine its original meaning and content. This is necessary because text can be altered or corrupted over time through errors in copying, editing, or translation. For example, imagine a sentence in a medieval manuscript that reads, "A king's wife was very angry." However, another version of the same manuscript reads, "The king's wife was very happy." The textual critic would examine the language, grammar, and context of both versions to decide which one is more likely to be the original. Moving on to the next term, trope. A trope is a common or overused theme, character, or plot device found in literature, film, or any other form of storytelling. Tropes can be familiar patterns. Moving on to the term trope. A trope is a common or overused theme, character, or plot device found in literature, film, and other forms of storytelling. Tropes can be familiar patterns such as the hero's journey. Trope is common in epics like Homer's The Odyssey or The Damsel in Distress that audiences recognize and respond to. They can also be used to convey complex ideas or emotions in a concise and relatable way. Examples of tropes include the chosen one narrative in Harry Potter or the love triangle and redemption arc. On to the term starting with U.
So the first term is utopia, an ideal society. Thomas More's Utopia presents a fictional perfect society.
Yes, Megha, it is very fascinating. And this text is also considered as one of the canonical texts of English literature.
Yes, Nitika. Our second term is unreliable narrator, a narrator whose credibility is questionable. Think of Holden Caulfield's in J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye.
Megha, I am reminded of a quote from this book, The Catcher in the Rye. It goes like, "If you do something too good, then after a while, if you don't watch it, you start showing off. And then you are not as good as anymore."
Next term is understatement, a figure of speech where something is unintentionally downplayed. For example, saying, "It's a bit chilly" in freezing weather.
Exactly. Just like today, the weather is very cold. And what about the next term?
Our next term is unity, the cohesive quality of a work where all elements work together. Aristotle derived the concept of unity in his famous work Poetics and emphasized the relevance of unity in drama, the unity of action, unity of place, and unity of time. Let's cover the terms starting with the letter V next.
So with the letter V, the first literary term is villanelle, a 19-line poetic form with a strict rhyming scheme Dylan Thomas's "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night" is a famous example.
Beautiful poem. The beginning lines goes like, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Raise, raise against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words has fogged no lightning they. Do not go gentle into that good night."
These beautiful lines, they always stay with us. And the next term is Victorian era, which marked the reign of Queen Victoria in Britain, a time of significant social, cultural, and industrial change. It saw the rise of the novel as a dominant literary form, with authors like Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte, and Thomas Hardy exploring themes of morality, class, and industrialization. The era also grappled with tensions between tradition and progress, reflected in its literature, art, and architecture.
Yes, Nitika. Alfred Tennyson's Ulysses is another famous work from this era. It is included in our syllabus from BA. Now, what is the next literary term?
The next term we have is verse. A verse is a single line of poetry or a segment within a poem or song. It can follow specific patterns like rhyme or meter, or exist as free verse without strict rule. Verses are building blocks of poetic expression, often used to convey rhythm, emotion, and imagery. Our next term is villain. A villain is a character in literature who opposes the hero or protagonist, often embodying evil, immorality, or conflict. Villains drive the central struggle of a story, challenging the hero's values or goals. Famous examples of villain include Shakespeare's Iago in Othello or Sauron in The Lord of the Rings.
Iago in Othello is a master manipulator using deceit and manipulation to incite jealousy and destruction, making him one of Shakespeare's most notorious villains. The next term with the letter W is wit. It refers to the ability to express clever, quick, and often humorous insights. It involves a sharpness of mind, allowing one to make pointed observations or wordplay. In literature, writers like Oscar Wilde are known for their use of wit to add humor and depth to their works, as seen in The Importance of Being Honest.
Such an important example. And now, what is the next term we have?
Next, we have wordplay. Wordplay is the clever and humorous manipulation of language, often through puns, double meanings, or playful use of words. It adds layers of meaning and wit to a text, engaging the reader's intellect and sense of humor. For example, in Twelfth Night, Shakespeare writes, "Better a witty fool than a foolish wit."
This is indeed a very clever phrase. So, shall we move on to the next term?
Yes, Nitika, the next term is willing suspension of disbelief. It refers to the audience's voluntary acceptance of fantastical elements in a story for the sake of enjoyment. Samuel Coleridge coined the term in his Biographia Literaria, describing how readers must set aside doubt to engage with poetry's imaginative aspects. In his poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Coleridge asks readers to believe in supernatural occurrences like the albatross, symbolic power, and the airy events at sea.
The literary terms under the letter X, we will start with xenia. It is an ancient Greek concept of hospitality, emphasizing the relationship between a host and their guest, marked by mutual respect and generosity. This idea was sacred in Greek culture, and failure to observe xenia could lead to divine punishment. In literature, it is often explored in the works like Homer's The Odyssey, where Odysseus' journey involves both the kindness and betrayal of host he encounters.
What about the literary terms starting with Y?
Under the letter Y, we have youthful innocence. It refers to the purity, naivety, and lack of experience often associated with young characters in literature. It highlights a time of untainted optimism and idealism before encountering the harsh realities of life. In Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Tom embodies youthful innocence through his adventurous spirit and moral simplicity, often unaware of the consequences of his actions. The next term is zeugma. Zeugma is a figure of speech in which a single word, usually a verb or an adjective, governs or modifies two or more words, though these words typically would not be linked together. This often creates a surprising or humorous effect. In Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, he uses zeugma in this line, "She made her heart light and her burden heavy." Here, the word made governs both heart and burden, which are contrasting concepts, producing an interesting and playful connection. And with this term, our series on literary terms come to an end. Megha, this has been an enlightening session, and the progression of this series has been truly enriching.
It certainly has, Nitika. As we said in the beginning, it has been a wonderful journey of literary terms, and to all our listeners, thank you for joining and keeping with us through this series. We hope you have enjoyed exploring these terms with us.
Yes, the year is about to end, and so we wish new beginnings and great achievements for you all.
Let us welcome 2025 together.
Happy New Year!